Because certainly when they were in charge, I wasn't voting with them, but I was voting with the Democrats. But the Democrats wanted more money, so it sometimes is a lonely fight. But yes, the Republicans are voting better, and they're talking better, and they think we should spend less money, and chastising the Democrats for all the deficits. So the Republicans, I don't believe, are any more credible. I don't think they've overcome the loss of their credibility. They had their chance, and not much good came of it all. But they're certainly doing better, not because of what they do, but because the Democrats are so bad. That's a heck of a way to win at this. But in the meantime, until we have our victories, until we come to our senses, it's actually very good. Shift power back and forth. Confuse them as much as possible. And maybe it'll tide us over. But the American people are, awakening in a very positive way. I'm not a pessimist to think that we can't awaken the American people when it comes to fiscal matters. They do remain rather immune to all the facts, but I think they know that these deficits can't last. The young people certainly know about it. I think they're sick and tired of what's going on in the war. I think there's a majority of the American people now saying, how long is this going to go on? And this is all good. But the greatest optimism comes from the college campuses. The young people are responding in a very favorable way. Not only because they know they're inheriting the financial mess and also the foreign policy mess, but young people respond to our message because it's, of course, consistent, and it puts the pieces back together about the concept of liberty. And young people, in a very natural sort of way, I think all of us believed it at one time. Sometimes it gets knocked out of it, and some of us, keep this idea. But liberty should mean, and does mean, that you have a right to your life. It's your life. And you have a right to your liberty, and your liberty doesn't come from the government. It comes in a natural way or a God-given way, and you deserve that right as long as you're not hurting other people.
Absolutely.
You should have the right to the fruits of your labor, which means that taxes would be much, much lower.
No tax.
But young people respond to this, and I talk a lot about personal liberty and personal choices and personal responsibilities, because the last thing I want to do is convey a libertine attitude. Oh yeah, we want liberty because you can go out and live a certain lifestyle. But even if people do that in a libertarian free society, I'm going to permit it. I'm going to be very tolerant. Freedom is tolerance. We should be able to tolerate, which liberals can't, tolerate the idea it's your money, it's your life. You can spend your money on whatever you want, and we're not going to tell you how to spend it. But the same way, we should be more aware of the fact that people spend their lives differently. It's generally accepted pretty well about our religious beliefs so far. There's some picking at that, but so far we generally say that people can have their own religious values, and we don't try to manage that. And if we can permit people making free choices on something as important of their eternity, and we allow free choices on what books you read, why has it come to the point where we have accepted this notion that the people aren't wise enough to decide what to put in their bodies?
Yeah.
One time, a few years ago or so, somebody came and asked me about, trying to get rid of some of the laws dealing with raw milk. And I said, oh, okay, that'll be fine. But to my surprise, I was delighted to find out that was an important issue for a lot of people. But why should that be? Why should that be so major to allow you to make a decision whether you can drink raw milk or not? But the young people recognize this, but they also recognize they know some of the falsehoods that are associated with the drug war. And but I'm always cautious with it. I'm cautious with the college kids, just as I'm cautious with my kids and my grandchildren dealing with drugs. And of course, I'd like to lecture other doctors too, because I think prescription drugs are so terribly dangerous.
Yeah.
In allowing those choices, excuse me, we tolerate people how they spend their money and their religious values, but we should tolerate other people who have certain personal habits that we might not endorse. But that doesn't mean to allow them to practice certain things. Doesn't mean that you have to endorse that in a personal way. But that is a huge step for a lot of people in this country, or in Washington at least. Doesn't seem to be a huge leap for college kids. They seem to know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's some people in Congress who sort of sympathize with what I'm saying, that we should just get rid of the drug war.
Yeah.
They'll have some sympathies, but they'll say, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't vote for that. And it might be one little vote of saying that the federal government shouldn't go in and override a state law that allows somebody who's dying of cancer to smoke marijuana. And that's a giant leap. Of course, if I'm on a liberal talk show and I know that they don't like the code word states' rights, because you know what you are if you believe in states' rights, but I will always bring up the subject in that issue that, in this issue I believe in states' rights. We'll be talking about a California law permitting the use of marijuana, but the federal government comes in. The state permits it, legalize it, and the federal government comes in, and all those laws overrule state laws. And sometimes, I hope subtly, they get this message that, yes, local options and local control is so much better than when the federal government comes in and comes down hard. It's not only on the conservative issues, but it's also on issues that are considered more liberal. But I think what we're talking about is neither conservative or liberal. We're talking about a more precise definition of a free society. And this is a system that brings people together. There's no doubt. That's why I think our turnouts have been good, and we get a broad cross-section of people that come in, because it's a philosophy that is non-judgmental, and people come together for this. The Constitution is not divisive. The Constitution, even with its flaws, is one where we weren't supposed to be dealing in these so many issues, and that and if you had to have some government dealing with it, it would be at the local level. But can you imagine what it would have been like back when they were writing the Constitution and fighting a revolution? That they stood around and they say, okay, well, what are we going to do about marriage? How are we going to handle the issue of marriage? But in marriage is something I consider very, very important. I happen to be married, and this whole idea, I don't even like the state government being involved in marriage.